Well, I am Kirklyn Yates. I am currently the Rocky Mountain Regional Area Coordinator for the PEACH Corps. PEACH stands for PCOS, Endometriosis, Adenomyosis, and Chronic Health Conditions. I started having endometriosis symptoms when I was about 10 years old, and I was not properly diagnosed until I was 22. Well, there's several really key instances that I feel like I remember. Overall, it's the same PMS symptoms, just exacerbated. So you have the pain, you have the cramps, you have the heavy bleeding, the headache, sometimes the nausea. I remember one time very vividly that I don't think people get a grasp on endometriosis because we think it only affects women, but it also affects little girls. And I say that because the first time that I remember bleeding, I bled in the floor while I was sitting on the floor playing with my Barbie dolls. So the first symptoms to getting a diagnosis, I would say it probably progressed as far as how my health went, how things fluctuated. I got to the point where I was having ovarian cyst rupture. I had about one rupture about every 2 years the first time. The first time I remember it rupturing, I was 14, and I was at a basketball game with my sister, and I was hanging out with my friends, and I just did not feel good. And I did not know why I didn't feel good. And I went and told my girlfriend, I was like, my stomach is hurting. I'm just going to go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom and something popped. And I could almost hear something pop. And I started screaming in pain. And people were coming in the bathroom because obviously there's a teenage girl in the bathroom screaming. And my mom was like, why don't you just go lay down in the car and we'll get, just let me know how you feel and we'll go from there. So I went and laid down in the car and I actually passed out in the car. And when my family came out, they found me and they were like, hey, how's it going? Are you doing okay? And that was when I went home and just kind of got a towel and went and laid on my bed with the towel underneath me. And I just thought, oh, I'm having a really bad period. And thankfully, there was never a time until I got older and was already aware of what was going on that I had to come to terms with what it was. I always just thought it's a bad period. I had one rupture when I was 14, one rupture when I was 16, one rupture when I was 17. And they started getting worse and worse and more frequent. And my mom took me to the gynecologist at 16 years old and was like, she's in severe pain. Something's got to give. You've got to do something. And the gynecologist, which was so wild looking back, because I think I would have a lot of issues if I saw this happen now. But I was 15 years old. I didn't know what to expect. And so the gynecologist was like, well, the only treatment we can offer you is birth control pills. But I always hate putting teenage girls on birth control pills. And I thought that was a really interesting take on it because they did help for a little bit, and that was great. And I was kind of surprised as to why the gynecologist would be so hesitant to put a teenage girl on birth control pills if it was going to alleviate her pain. I guess for the concern of promiscuity or different areas that come with that. And so that did help for a while. And I stayed on birth control from the time I was 17 until I was 22 when I had my hysterectomy. The birth control pills, more than anything, I think kind of masked the symptoms. They almost like shut down your system in a way. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand when it comes to birth control is they think, oh, it just keeps you from getting pregnant, when in reality it stops the entire system and slows the entire system. And I've been on several birth control pills where they stop your period altogether and just freeze your symptoms, freeze your whole system, your whole reproductive system. And I'm almost convinced that's probably not the way to go either. Because once you finally do have a period again, the symptoms are all coming back and it's like it's been building up. I did notice towards the end, I developed premenstrual dysphoric disorder. That has only been a diagnosis since 2018, and not a lot of people actually know what that is. And so what it is it's when your body doesn't handle the rise and drops of estrogen very well. And it causes your body to go into a panic state and can cause psychotic episodes if you're not careful and you don't watch it. And so there would be days that would go by when I knew my period was coming. And then I would just wake up one day and it was like my period had already started and it was over and I didn't remember a 3-day stint. So my first really big instance with it was I remember it was like I opened my eyes and woke up in a doctor's office. And I was sitting there with my doctor, and my husband was with me. And my doctor was like, "Can you tell me what happened, Mrs. Yates?" And I'm like, "I don't know how I got here. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know how I got here." And my husband was like, "She's having an episode. She is not herself. Something is wrong." He didn't know what was going on with me. And they were like, "Are you having thoughts of hurting yourself?" And they go through all these questions. And I just broke down crying, and I was like, "No, I want to live. I want to go on tomorrow. I don't have any intentions to hurt myself. I want to keep going. I want to push hard." And I think at that point, that was when they knew, okay, she's not faking it. She came in, and her husband's like worried for her, worried she's having some kind of stroke, worried because PMTD can mimic the symptoms of a heart attack, or it can trigger a real heart attack. And you never know which one it is. And so I've been to the emergency room several times with that. And I told my doctor, and my doctor was like, "You called 4 weeks ago with similar symptoms. So let's track this." And I say this take this with a grain of salt, because every doctor is different, and I've been put in bad positions by both male and female doctors, but this doctor was a woman. And this doctor paid more attention to how your reproductive cycle manifests in your whole body and your whole physical being. And so she was like, "Let's watch this." And after 2 months of tracking, she says, "I have no doubt you have PMDD." I never had anything work for me. And I say that because there are women that have had PMDD for 20 plus years. And I can't imagine it, because you get to a point where, I mean, it will get more severe over time, and it does get worse. And you do begin to fear what could happen when you're in a state like that. I was in a PMDD support group led by a lady named Christine, and her parents still continue to run the PMD Global Support Network. And I remember it was the month before I had my hysterectomy, and I was like coming to this group, and I was finding out everybody else felt the same way. Everybody's having these symptoms. And one day I woke up to a news article, and Christine was gone. And during an episode, she had taken her own life. And she'd spoken to her mother, let her know that she was fine, that her period had come early, but she was going to track it. She was going to pay attention. She was home alone, but that she was safe. And it makes you realize that this is not something women choose. This is not something that they can even really fight against without the proper care, the proper tools. I mean, I truly believe that something would have happened to me if it had not been for my husband, who'd been home with me and became to the point where he was scared to leave me. Honestly, I don't think I started experiencing PMDD symptoms until I'd had COVID the first time. And that sounds really crazy that I can track it down to that, but that was when my cyst rupture started to become every month. That was when my PMDD symptoms developed. I never thought I had issues with PCOS before this point, but when I was 21, my blood work came back showing I had PCOS as well. And so during all of this, we were moving houses. We moved to California, and then 6 months later, we moved to Wyoming. So I'm doing all of this while moving, while bleeding. And that's my joke. Anything you can do, I can do bleeding. Um, but once I got out here, I knew I needed to see a specialist. And so I saw a specialist outside of Denver who specifically worked with endometriosis. And he was like, "Well, we're going to have to do a laparoscopic surgery to diagnose." And I was like, "I'm already in so much pain. Let's not push it any more than we have to. Let me just see how long I can make it," I guess is the equivalent of what I said. But he wanted to do some blood work. So the blood panel came back, and he was like, "Can you guess what I'm going to say when we got your blood work?" And I was like, "Are you able to tell endo?" And he said, "No." He said, "But your blood work showed that your levels are consistent with people that have PCOS," which is really odd to me, because PCOS, I've noticed in one of my girlfriends that had it, people struggle with weight loss. I've always struggled with weight gain. People have issues with acne. I never had really bad acne. People have issues with like hair loss. I always had thick hair. I didn't really feel like I fit this stereotype for PCOS that we're taught to look for. I never had a lot of like facial hair, um, to the point that some women do. I mean, I never felt like that was something that would come up for me. But that was when I started realizing every stereotype I'd been told of what to watch for might not be just accurate in the most, I was very surprised. That was when they told me my fertility was going to be affected, that people with PCOS, if they are ever able to conceive naturally, that it's very difficult, that it takes years. It's like sometimes rigorous treatments of IVF. And I spoke with my husband about it, and we knew we hadn't been getting pregnant yet. And so we were very confused as to why that was happening. And it was like we had answers. But no, I mean, we stopped birth control methods from a few months after we got married. We were ready to start our family, and we were ready to just move on. And that's what a lot of people are very quick to assume. Why aren't you having children? What are you waiting on? Why are you, everybody likes to make it their business. And so my answer was always, oh, we're not ready yet, which I assumed if my body wasn't getting pregnant, then obviously we weren't ready yet. So that's probably just a good thing to tell people. So I guess what's so wild is I never formally got the diagnosis. I was told I would never formally get the diagnosis till my hysterectomy at that point. So I had been bleeding a lot. I was having more cyst rupture. I started going to the hospital more thinking I was having miscarriages, because as a teenager, when I wasn't active, I didn't think I would be having a miscarriage. I knew it was a cyst rupturing. But once we got married and we started trying to start our family, I became very concerned very quickly that I could be miscarrying. And I know the health repercussions of that are oftentimes a lot greater. And there's a lot of issues that come afterward and procedures you have to have. And so I told my husband, I was like, I can't do this. I'm going to have to get on some kind of birth control because I'm too afraid of being out here. And he was at work. He would go to work. He would be gone a week at a time, military. I was out here by myself. And I became very scared to do that on my own, 1,000 miles away from my parents, either sister, any grandparents, anybody was 1,000 miles away. And so we made the decision with the doctor to get back on birth control because we believed that would help my symptoms as well as prevent any kind of pregnancy. And I like to say it did help for about 6 months. And once the PMDD symptoms got so great, I would call the doctor back, and he would say, well, we'll have you meet with a surgeon and we'll see what we can come up with. But this is the surgeon that we recommend for your specific case because you're so young. Just meet with him. And so this was in February, and they scheduled me a pre-op surgery appointment with the surgeon in August. So I knew I had to make it to August. So I had to wait 6 months of the PMDD symptoms and the cyst rupturing symptoms. And so I spoke with my mom, and I was like, Mom, the issue becomes there's a lot of doctors that can still refuse to do the surgery because they're scared it will affect your fertility as a young woman. And even if I sign all the paperwork saying I'm fine, I want to live, however this affects my fertility, there are still many doctors that refuse to treat it and refuse to do surgery. So the surgeon that I met with ended up being my seventh opinion. And my mom actually flew out for the consultation. And my mom started having me print pictures of the blood clots that I would pass every month. And she printed them out and took them to the doctor's office with us. And she said, this is what's going on every month. However you feel, I'm scared that my 22-year-old daughter is going to die. And my husband went with me because even he told me, as backwards as it seemed, he was very afraid for me to go to these appointments alone because he was scared I was being dismissed as a woman on my own. And he said, whatever idea this doctor has, I'm going to be there and I'm going to back you up. And if he doesn't take your word for it, I'm just going to echo what you say. and I'm just going to be there and just vouch for you. And so we walked in, and the doctor was not at all what I was expecting. He looked at me, he looked at only me, he spoke only to me, and listened to everything I had to say. And he said, he laid out all the options, and he said, I need to know what you want to do. And I said, I want to live, and I don't see how I can continue doing that with the bleeding and the pain. And so he pulled out some paperwork from a file, and he said, I know you came in asking if we can take your ovaries, but with what you're telling me about the bleeding, I'm going to suggest we take it all. So whereas before I thought, okay, maybe they'll take my ovaries, I can have IVF treatments, we can do this, he was saying this was it. And I could go home and wait another 6 months for a consultation if I made it 6 months, if I didn't bleed to death, if I didn't have an episode, if I didn't, whatever, or I could decide to do it now. And I can still remember that day so vividly. And he said, I just need your signature on about 10 pages. And I panicked, and I looked at my mom and I looked at my husband, and they were like, you know, we have to do this. You have to live. No matter what it comes to, you have to live. We are more worried about preserving you than we are preserving your fertility. And so I signed the paperwork that day, and I left the doctor's office. I mean, I was all but using a walker. I was hunched over. My mom and my husband are helping carry me out. I walked like with a hunch for months. And that was when I realized this couldn't go on anymore. I was 22 years old and young and supposedly healthy, and I was living like I couldn't even get around on my own. There was a lot of pain. A lot of times it could trigger UTIs very easily. Um, any amount of exercise, any amount of great walking, any wrong sneeze, and I would start bleeding. Just right there. I wore pads every day just because I never knew when it was going to happen. That can lead to infections. That's not sanitary every single day to live like that. So they told me that they were going to send me home, and that their scheduling lady at the front desk was going to call me with an opportunity to schedule the surgery. And this was in the middle of August, and she called and said, we have September 7th open. And I will never forget, September 7th is like a big day for me. That's like, you know, I say my hysterectomy, but that's just such a big day for me, a big day for my husband, a big day where we can stop and be thankful for what happened, thankful that I'm alive. And looking back, it really makes me cry, but I had my aunts texting me, my cousin texting me, today's the day. We're so happy for you. We're so thankful for you. We're so thankful you're still with us. Called my grandparents the morning of, and, you know, even my little old grandfather, who was just like, I'm so happy you don't have to deal with all this anymore. I mean, everybody knew. And it was a good day. It was a day that I was able to see the Lord's providence in where I was, because I knew everything I had been through, every pain, every blood clot, everything suddenly for the first time was seen and acknowledged. Since I was 10 years old, everything that had been hidden behind closed doors was out in the open, and this was my life, and this was it, and there was no secret, and everybody knew. And it ended up being one of the biggest blessings for me to get my life back. My surgery, I laugh and say, was easier than my wisdom teeth removal, but the surgery itself was. I had a great surgeon. I had a laparoscopic surgery. I have 5 small incisions on my abdomen that are about an inch long that you can hardly see. The surgery itself, I think, took about 2 hours from what I gather. I was in immediate recovery for 2 hours. And I mean, they had me doped up on everything. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel nausea. I'm severely emetophobic, so that's a big thing for me. I didn't want to be nauseous, but they also don't want that motion going on immediately after abdominal surgery. I'm trying to think now what they even sent me home with. They sent me home in a diaper, obviously. um, because they have to reattach the uterine and vaginal wall because obviously there's nothing there at that point. They took my uterus, ovaries, cervix, and tubes. So, so there's nothing down there. They give you laxatives quite a bit, so you feel like a baby wearing a diaper and not having solid poop for about a week. But that's to prevent straining because you cannot strain those muscles. You can't strain. They automatically tense up on their own when you're I can't remember what the muscle's called now in your stomach. When they cut it, it has to grow back together itself, and so it tenses up. So they give you muscle relaxers to keep that down. They tell you not to use a heating pad because right on the incisions, it can cause bacterial growth, infection. And so you have to be very careful with what you put on your stomach. So I used a lot of like just padding. I put pillows over my stomach. I tried not to apply ice because that would make me tense up, but I tried not to apply heat because it could cause bacterial growth. But no, I can remember coming home and the bleeding stopped after about 2 or 3 days, honestly. They told me because of the risk of endometriosis that they had to scrape my pelvic cavity. So they were not able to detect any, so they assumed it was microscopic endometriosis, which they said can grow quicker, can grow in more places, obviously because it's so small. And what's so scary about it is it doesn't show up on scans, and it doesn't even show up when you're looking at it in an open body cavity. They scraped the pelvic cavity and to let them know in 6 months if I thought it was back. So I I was very nervous every day for 6 months, and so far I am about a year and 2 months post-op, and I've not had any symptoms. Um, I would say the emotional part of that was worse than the physical because, when I get my wisdom teeth out, all I'm worried about is, ow, my jaw hurts and my mouth hurts. But with this, I think I had this moment once the drugs had worn off, once everything was kind of out of my system. And I remember waking up the next day and I sat straight up and my husband's on the edge of the couch and he sits up and looks at me and I just start crying and I said, oh my gosh, what have I done? It's over and it's gone. I mean, and um, of course, they had given me so much medication to control the PMDD that I had to detox and go through withdrawals immediately after surgery from all of the psychiatric meds they wanted to give me, the pain meds, and it made me really sick, caused a lot of pain. My body was still tensing up. It made me like angry. It made me like have these episodes where I just didn't feel good and I would panic and I'd be like, I feel like I'm going to throw up, but at the same time I'm angry and I don't know what's going on. And my husband was so calm and he was like, we just have to sit here and let the medicine pass. There's nothing we can do. He said, if you're getting anxious, then I'll help you stand up and we can walk laps around the dining room table. If that helps get some of your energy out, we can go outside, take some deep breaths outside. It was still September. It was still warm for where we live in Wyoming. And that took about a day to detox. And of course, that was pretty rough after abdominal surgery to detox from medications that the doctor never should have put me on to begin with. Um, they started piling on more and more medication. They would tell me to take this anxiety pill and this will help you get better. Well, if that's not working, take two. Well, if that's not working, take three. And they just kept piling on more medication that I look back now and I know was totally unnecessary because obviously it didn't do anything if I was still experiencing pain, if I was still experiencing mood swings. But it's so scary to me how quick people are to medicate rather than to treat. There was no reason for me to question as a 21-year-old what the doctor is giving me. Because they're doctors, they have your best interests at heart, they want to do what's best for you. And I think we all get caught up in that. And well, if the doctor says this is what we need to do, then this is what we need to do. But realistically, what I needed to do was I needed to get my ovaries out. And once my ovaries were out, all of the symptoms stopped, all of the pain stopped. I went to several doctors who would say, you're like a different person. You don't even experience the same physical issues. And it's so scary to me that they just kept medicating me until I didn't even know who I was. I got a lot of hate once I came out and said I was going to have a hysterectomy. I joined a support group for hysterectomies. Per the request of my doctor, as soon as they found out I was going to have a hysterectomy, they said, you need to go see a therapist. You need to see a grief counselor. I was like, nobody died. And they were like, no, but you still need to see a grief counselor. So I said, okay. So I joined a hysterectomy support group. It's virtual. There's thousands of women on it. Other women my age, most of the women are older. But even within the support group, I experienced so much hate. I had people calling me and telling me that, I'm a Christian, and they were like, you're being a bad Christian because you're not letting God work. You're not giving God room to work. I had people telling me, once you take this out, you're not going to be a real woman anymore. How do you think your husband's going to look at you? Do you think your husband's ever going to want to be with you again? I had women sending me pictures of their newborn son saying, this is what you're never going to have. There was a lot of hate and a lot of ugly words surrounding when it came out that I was going to have a hysterectomy. At first, I was I don't want anybody to know I'm having a hysterectomy. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about PMDD, because if I tell people that I had mood swings, they're going to think I'm crazy. That's our bad word, is crazy. And they're not going to know what to think. But when you stop and realize how many women have suffered with this, and you realize how many people have been dismissed, and I didn't want to speak about it. I didn't want to tell people I had a hysterectomy. I didn't want to be open about it. But once I started getting all those hate comments, I am one of those people that you could pat me on the back and tell me how great I am all day, but when somebody attacks me, that's what fuels my fire. I can't help it. And maybe I just have my sister's anger issues. But once people started coming at me, I thought, I know there's other people suffering that have dealt with this and that are alone. Because as much as I feel alone, I'm going to branch out in my loneliness, and I'm going to meet people where they are. So I remember the day I wore my Endometriosis Strong sweatshirt, and I made a video in my dining room, and I explained exactly what I was going to have done. I'm going to have a hysterectomy. They're going to take my uterus, they're going to take my ovaries, they're going to take my tubes and my cervix. I've done everything I can. I can't have children. I can't get pregnant on my own. I've done everything I know to do. My husband's backing me up. My family knows how bad it's been. I'm losing too much blood. I'm either going to bleed out and die or have a psychotic episode. I don't know what to do. And I was brutally honest, and I posted it on Facebook for all my little small town. We grew up in a small town, for everybody to see. I turned off the comments, obviously, turned off the comments on Instagram, but I posted like a 7-minute long video just telling everybody this is what's going to happen. And it's like suddenly once I did that, I was free. There was no more, it was all out there. Everything, I used to be that girl that hid my pads on the way to the bathroom at school. I'd tuck them under my sweatshirt and like walk, trying to hide it. I didn't want anybody to know I was on my period. Suddenly all that was gone. It was out the window, and it was out in the world, and it was there for everybody to see. And I thought, I can't suffer like this and keep a happy face on and pretend to be something for people, because first of all, girl, nobody has that kind of energy. Nobody has that kind of energy, and nobody should have to. And I really stopped and started thinking, what do I want out of life? What do I want? Well, my goal was to be a mom. Well, aren't there still kids that's moms are gone that would give anything to be part of a family? Well, yeah. Do you think I could pull myself up by my bootstraps and be a mom for them if that's what they need? Yeah. I think with God's guidance and direction, I certainly could. And so when I started looking at it like that, I started thinking, what if I have daughters one day? What if I adopt daughters and they go through something like this or go through some equivalent of this? How do I want to tell them I handled it? And that's what's fueled everything I've done since then. I've done it all with the intention of my daughters, wherever they're from, whatever they experience, whatever their life looks like, I want to be able to tell them that this is how mom handled it. And I know that a hysterectomy is not the cure-all end-all for everybody, and I know my situation is unique, but once I no longer experience symptoms, I mean, I don't even know what day it is half the time. I have to check my calendar, I have to check my stuff because it doesn't matter anymore. You know, I just get up and I go to work, I go to school, I do my thing, and I'm not checking the calendar and making little X's and little red dots and trying to figure out what day my life is going to have to stop for 7 days or 9 days or 14 or however many I bleed for. I don't check that anymore. I just live. And I'm so thankful to live, and I feel more of an obligation because I truly feel that I've been set free. So I feel a moral obligation to speak out because I am one of the very few that was blessed enough to no longer experience symptoms from that. And I do feel an obligation to help because there's a lot of people who would give anything to help, but they can't get out of bed to do it. Words of advice or last message. If I'm speaking to any little Kirklyn Yates, I guess named Kirklyn Mason, who's 10 years old and playing with her Barbies and bleeding, or a 14-year-old that wants to just go to the basketball game with her sister and is bleeding, or the 16-year-old who's got family company over and is trying to be really quiet to hide her screams in the bathroom from pain. It doesn't get better unless you speak up. Your situation deserves validation, deserves acknowledgement, and deserves a voice. No matter what it is, you deserve to speak up. Women are not made to be shells of ourselves, just suffering in bed. We are meant to impact, we are meant to serve, and we are meant to get out there and make a difference, whatever impact we hold, whatever we're supposed to do. And you can't do that from bed.